Hello, my friends, this is Paul, and guess what? I'm feeling upset. So you know what that means, right? It means this video is going to be great, because I tend to make the best content when my emotions are in a negative state. So today we're going to talk about ISTJ flaws and the aspects of our personality trait that are not as desirable to the average person. However, before you get on the bandwagon and have your humongous list of complaints against us, you do realize that because of the introverted sensing, introverted feeling combo, we are extremely aware of every bodily sensation we have, as well as being aware of who we are and how we're feeling, even if we don't always know how to express it with words. So a lot of times we've already thought of everything you said, but we're actually making it even worse than it is, because when we're stressed out, that extroverted intuition just goes all over the place and blows it out of proportion. Then the introverted feeling leads to a sense of basically taking all of the blame on ourselves. So let me give you an example of where I overblamed myself for, give or take, about 11 or 12 years based on something that wasn't entirely my fault. So I was notorious when I was in youth group for trying to talk to every single person, at least once. And I'd like to say that I became decently popular for the time. A lot of people liked me, a lot of people really liked me, but a lot of people really, really didn't like me. And those people, which might have been like 2 or 3 people out of the 40 regulars, told the youth group leader, like, hey, Paul is making us super uncomfortable. And then the youth group leaders gave me a stern talking to. And what I did after that was I realized, shoot, I did not mean to make anyone uncomfortable. I was trying to be a nice guy. So I went to every single girl that I could think of in the youth group, and I apologized to all of them. Even wrote them handwritten notes that said, like, I hope you can forgive me. I can't believe I made such a big mistake. And a lot of them came back to me in person and said, Paul, what are you apologizing for? You've never done anything wrong. And admittedly, some of them, they knew that I was, a silly, immature teenager. And, silly, immature teenagers say strange things all the time. But they didn't specifically believe that I had offended them or crossed a line. So the reality, and I found this out many, many years after the fact, when we had sort of a reunion of sorts, they said to me, Paul, I think what actually happened is those were just immature girls that were overly sensitive about everything. And there was also a lot of hypocrisy in that group. Not going to get into it. But let's just say that I was probably among, like, all the way at the bottom as far as the troublemaking scale, and some other people that didn't get punished were doing things that were objectively wrong in the Catholic Church. And the fact that I got blamed for it, well, that led to me basically saying, what is wrong with me? Like, do girls hate me? Because, and it just led into a really destructive cycle that probably contributed to the depression I had for so long. ISTJs also have a tendency to not give as much affirmation as people would like, but there's a reverse side to that as well, that a lot of times they have trouble taking affirmation as a result. See, ISTJs have this mindset of, like, do to others as you would have them do to you. So in other words, if there's something that they want, that's generally going to be something that they do to other people, because they tend to have this distorted view of everyone must think the same as I do. They don't. Reality check. Every single individual is different. But due to the lack of intuition, that doesn't come to us in the spur of the moment. So a lot of times, if an ISTJ is uncomfortable with words of affirmation, they're not going to give it words of affirmation in return, because they think it's no big deal to me, so why should it be a big deal to this other person? So when they do affirm people, it tends to be very, like, kind of a by the numbers type of deal. Like, we might say, oh, very much appreciated. I shall take your offer into consideration. Whereas, the average feeling type might be like, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you've said. And we have our moments like that, but they're so few and far between. I can't think of too many where I actually did that. Probably when I got out of depression the very first time and I was on that I am finally happy. That probably was the only time I can think of in recent memory, but at the most affirming I probably ever got in recent memory was something along the lines of, "Oh my gosh, I am so thankful that I did not offend you." That's terrible. In person, it was more of just like, I am speechless. I do not know how to express this. So a lot of times it's not necessarily the fact that ISTJs are unemotional and ungrateful. It's just that because the feeling is introverted and it's also tertiary, it means that it's hard for us to express it. Kind of like how, well, any tertiary function is basically, it's doable, it's just hard. Like ENFPs on the flip side have trouble planning things because extroverted feeling is their tertiary function. So in the same way, INFJs, my enigma type, they have trouble explaining their reasoning. So in the same way, we have trouble explaining our emotions. So a lot of times we find that it's easier to write it out in a letter or in a constructive way. Like a lot of times I explain how I feel to people through my novels, through movies, through YouTube videos. That's a good way for us to exercise our extroverted intuition, and it gives other people an insight into, you guys are a lot deeper than I gave you credit. We really shouldn't call you shallow as much as we do. Now, that is going to lead into another fault of the ISTJ personality type, and that's with inferior intuition, it definitely comes across as though we don't really have a far reaching brain. And I think that that's only half true. I definitely don't think it's impossible for ISTJs to think ahead. We usually like to plan out like every little thing that's going on. If we're about to do, say, a hangout with a friend, we usually have an agenda. ISTJs that are career driven are, of course, going to be thinking about their career, but they're not going to plan out so far in advance into the unforeseeable future. So that can lead to paralysis in a completely unfamiliar situation. If, say, a car breaks down and the ISTJ never had any experience with fixing cars, they're probably going to just stand there and not know what to do. And even though they're usually the calm, collected voice of reason that'll be telling everyone else to calm down, usually that "what do I do" is done in a very, I don't know, kind of calm way. And some of you might be wondering, why just stand there, do something? It's because we're taking that time to think and to go back into our memory and say, is there anything comparable that we can relate this to? And if the answer is no, then we're just going to stand there longer. Now, regarding the tertiary feeling, one of the biggest hurdles ISTJs have actually has to do with the fact that our seventh function is extroverted feeling. So one of the faults we have there is that we have a tendency to not pick up on and also not care about social customs that people take for granted to make others happy. Now, I mentioned this before in my The Mystery of Extroverted Feeling video, but if, say, someone were to invite me to a wedding, I'd question why does that matter? Because we live in an era where a lot of things are done over a webcam, like I'm doing to you, over Skype, over texting. There's a lot of digital ways to do things. So I asked, well, what is the big deal if I just have the wedding recorded, which you're probably gonna do, and I'll just watch it later. They said, no, we want your presence there. And I'd say, how does putting my butt on a bench affect your wedding? It doesn't do anything besides it creates more body heat, especially if you're getting married in July. And the answer to that question, which I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, is that there's a certain emotional release that causes them to be happy because someone they care about is in their vicinity. I know, it sounds really, really stupid. But the reality is that a lot of people do base a lot of their decisions on their emotions. And we ISTJs actually base a lot of things on our emotions. We just don't always know how to describe them. A lot of times it's more of a behind the scenes kind of thing. Like, for example, if I had my way and I had an unlimited budget, I would eat Cheerios every single day. Why? Not because they're healthy. Far from it. Because it makes me happy. And it makes me even happier if I can get into a solid routine for the week and for my life. So, eating a bowl of Cheerios creates an emotional release from the glory of the familiar. So, in a manner of speaking, that's an emotional response, is that feeling of comfort. Now, most ISTJs aren't going to want to admit it, but that is what's going on, is that insistence on sticking to the past is an emotional reaction. It's not always logical to have the walls blue. That's not logical. That's a preference. Admittedly, I didn't paint them, but I think the person who did paint them was like, Paul, you like blue, so what the heck? Now, granted, we're not going to do something that's going to involve too much work. And I'm glad you mentioned work, because here's another one, and I'll thank Heart of Mishi in advance, because she kind of beat me to it. ISTJs are secretly, wait for it, very, very lazy. Yeah, you heard it. No, I am not actually secretly a perceiving type. We ISTJs try to make sure that we do the absolute minimal yet also maximum effect. If that sounds confusing, let me try to break it down for you. So, ISTJs, more so than the ESTJs, like to base their decisions on what is practical and what is doable. So whereas an ESTJ might be more about what is logical, ISTJs might say, I don't think in the moment being logical is the most practical thing to do. So they might think about what is strictly necessary right now. However, sometimes that leads to them thinking that overexerting themselves isn't the most practical thing to do. So a lot of times, if they don't really have a passion for someone or something, they're going to try to cut as many corners as possible. They're going to say, I don't need to fully clean my room because I know where everything is. And keeping it overtly organized and having it so that even a speck of dust on my books is bad, no, that is too much work. What is the point? Now, I know a lot of ISTJs are actually extremely uppity and love everything to be organized, but the key word is that this organization that ISTJs like is 100% subjective. They may try to argue it's based on aesthetic sense, but really it's all their personal preferences. At the end of the day, there may be an ISTJ that hates this color blue on my wall and would prefer yellow, and you know what? Power to them. But ultimately, they're going to want to do what makes them comfortable. Now, you might be wondering, well, Paul, what's the inverse to that when ISTJs give their maximum effort? If their almost non-existent tertiary feeling tells them that they deeply, deeply, deeply care about something, they're going to want to maximize that effort because at the end of the day, ISTJs do what makes them happy. So if they care about someone and that person gives them a great amount of joy and respect and comfortability, then the ISTJ is going to want to preserve that. So that leads to us having surprisingly caring moments where we might mow the entire lawn without being asked, or we might go above and beyond our budget to get people a present. There's usually a caveat in there. I'm not going to lie, I've been guilty of that. Sometimes I'll buy people a present and they'll be like, Paul, this is cool. I'll say, heck yeah, because I want to use it too. So there is that little aspect of, yeah, I'm secretly buying this for myself, even though I'm buying it for you. That's happened. Bought my friend Nick a Switch. He loves it. I love it even more. So at the end of the day, if you want an ISTJ to do an act of service for you, try to think, is he or she going to get something out of it? And that sounds so selfish. And I hate it. But that's the problem with introverted feeling, is it's all about me, baby. It's all about what's in here that you can't see, even when you look down your shirt, because your heart is, inside your chest. And even if I believed in taking off my shirt in front of a webcam, you wouldn't be able to see it. So no one else can see it but me, unless you've got an x-ray. The final fault I want to talk about before I wrap this up, because I don't want this video to go over long, is problems that we have with our two dominant functions. And that's that ISTJs have a tendency to, well, get in a rut, and they also have a tendency to have a very manufactured, encyclopedic type of voice. Now, not every ISTJ is like that. A lot of ISTJs actually try to be very polite. The problem is that the politeness comes in such a routine manner that it's almost as if they were prepared for the scenario ahead of time and didn't adapt to an unfamiliar thing. Like they might just automatically assume, okay, I am a butler, so that means I shall take the chair out from behind the person, not taking into account, oh, maybe that person is a feminist and believes men shouldn't be pulling out my chair. I am perfectly capable of sitting on a chair myself. ISTJs aren't going to think like that. They're just going to be like, you've got free service. Why don't you just take it? Who cares if you can or can't do it? Just let me serve you. Why not? So there's that lack of extroverted feeling again. Also, we might greet someone and use the same greeting every single time. We might say, greetings. It is a pleasure to see you. So yes, routine politeness. Then there's the blunt talking. You see, ISTJs having extroverted thinking, we tend to think out loud, so it leads to moments like I don't know, someone we know just got pregnant, and we'll be like, two people for the price of one, huh? Well, when that baby poops out of you, hope you're able to clean up. Humor like that. ISTJs generally have very morbid, dark, slightly sarcastic humor because they believe that honesty is the best politics. So therefore, if you're not being honest, then, well, you're a terrible person. So it leads to them basically saying whatever's on their mind. Now, sometimes they use humor to express it. And a lot of times that humor is the type of humor that feeling types higher up would probably consider it insensitive, and to a certain degree, even some inferior extroverted feelers. I've had my ISTP friend be like, Paul, don't be saying that outright about Asians. Because I think one time I was like, oh yeah, how do Asians see when they always squint with their eyes? And he's like, you can't say that to Asians. Heck, if there's an Asian watching this, they're probably going to get super offended and say, ah! I really don't get it. I really don't get why we can't just speak what's on our mind. I don't know. If someone wants to tell me in the comment section, go for it. But it may just be something that I'll just have to say, okay, you people are weird, but okay, I'll put up with it anyway. So a lot of times ISTJs just need to learn to zip it. The problem is if they don't zip it, then they're going to make their feelings known anyway in some kind of indirect way. Like, for example, if I'm at a young adult meeting where everyone's talking about philosophy, I might think the tactful thing to do would be just to not say anything, because they're all talking nonsense, but maybe I should keep my mouth shut because that could offend someone. But then they start talking in that philosophical language, and I'm just there going, and I'm just trying to hold in my laughter as much as possible, or I'll turn around and I'll say, like, excuse me while I go to the restroom, and then I'll just crack up when no one is listening. So ISTJs find little means of escapism to make sure that one way or another, whatever it is they're thinking is going to come out. So I usually like to end these videos with advice on how to handle ISTJs, but to be honest, I kind of want to take a different approach this time. This time, I want to address any ISTJs that might be watching this, however 3 of you there are, and tell you how can you avoid these pitfalls. As someone who stresses out every single night trying to make sure my polar function is developed, here's a few things I've picked up. 1, while it is always good to tell the truth, there's also prudent truth-telling. So maybe take a couple of seconds to think if maybe you could say the truth later instead of right away. And also think about how much you know the person. Because if you're talking to a complete stranger, I think it's safe to assume that your robotic routine method of greeting people is a good thing to do. That's what I usually do, so it seems to work most of the time. The second pointer is if you really want to make sure that you're not coming across as an insensitive prick that questions why you want to get odor on the benches at a wedding, maybe ask the person a lot of questions and then maybe also ask if there's something in it for you, like say, okay, well, what kind of drinks are you going to serve at the reception? Are you going to have decent kind of music? Is the church going to be overly crowded? That's just for a wedding. If it's anything else, like a baby shower, ugh, or anything like that, just ask, okay, what's the structure going to be like? If you're going on vacation, could you please tell me the layout of the vacation so that I can plan out where the rest stops are? Basically, ask the person to shed light on the unfamiliar. And then the final piece of advice, because I'm going way longer than I thought, good grief, is, well, the final piece I have for you is give yourself a. That is really uncomfortable. So ask someone else to give you a pat on the back. Because we ISTJs really need to learn that we're actually really awesome and we do a lot of hard work and people really appreciate it, but we're such perfectionists that we just can't accept good enough. It has to be the best. So be okay, learn to be humble enough to say, okay, this is okay. This work is okay. It doesn't have to be 100% great. You do that and then you can go back to being lazy. And I'll say one more piece. What the heck? Don't be afraid of taking naps. Just don't let the stereotype of ISTJs are always hardworking and always on top of themselves get to you. You know you want it. You know you would love a day where you can just sit back, swig on some iced tea, get your pillows up, and just go, a day off. I love it. Because we're not ESTJs. We love our comfort, so take advantage of it. With that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you have suggestions for other ISTJ info dumping videos. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and if you don't mind, I think I might just go and be lazy right now. Bye-bye.